Tikkun Olam. We have to be a light unto the nations. What about a light unto yourselves? You know, they think it's the nations. What about ourselves? Jews don't have a clue of what they're supposed to be. But we've got to teach the world what they're supposed to be. As they say, charity begins at home. That's where it begins. Okay. Has nothing to do with the world. It has to do with us.
I know, with us.
Okay, let's get back to the Gemara. So Rabbi Yochanan had said that regarding the concept of, although we say Eino Damak Dav Shalom Olam, to affect something which doesn't exist, you cannot. Your action is meaningless versus the future. For instance, if you're of the opinion Eino Damak Dav Shalom Olam, you cannot affect something which doesn't exist. So let's say a person writes a contract, I will sell you a piece of property that I will buy. And he buys that property. The contract has no value. Of course, you can't sell something that's not yours. But what about the act of transfer? Does it have value when you do purchase the property? So if you're of the opinion, and even Rameir, who says a person can, that's only something which ultimately is going to happen. We spoke about Peres Dekel, the fruits that will grow from my tree. Rameir says that you can. Wait. Let me finish speaking. The Gemara is going to come up. We're going to discuss in the Gemara later. But I'm saying, we're talking about the action to have value as an action. Like we said, a person tithes truma, something that's detached, something that's attached. So we say when it will be detached, the action takes on value. When? Retroactively, the action is called an act of tithing. But when is the tithing effective? Only once the other thing is detached. So we're giving meaning and value to the action, not the consequence of the action. Right? Even if your opinion, you could transfer or transact something that doesn't exist. The fact that could you own something before it comes into existence? It only means the means of transfer has value for whenever that item comes into existence, that produce comes into existence. So we hear the act of tithing has value because at this moment I could detach what's growing. But that's only to give value to the action that I'm doing. But ultimately, when is it effective? It's only effective when I detach whatever I detach. That's when it'll be effective. Instead, it's like a person says, so we say the act of kiddushin is now to be effective in 30 days. So it's two things. There's the act of marriage and there's the effect of the marriage. So it's the same thing here. The act of tithing is now, but it should not even be considered an act of tithing because you have no control of what you're tithing. The answer is I do have control. It's biyado because he could detach. But the Gemara is going to discuss the case. What if something hasn't yet grown? Let's say something grew only less than the third. Less than the third is not classified as grain. It's not grain. I want to do an act of tithing for when it will grow more than a third. It's not an act of tithing. Even when it grows more than the third, if you're of the opinion, you can't affect something that doesn't exist. Since it hasn't grown the minimal level of growth to be able to be tithed, it's not even considered an act of tithing. The Gemara is going to say, it will. It's valid. The Gemara will say that. If you're of the opinion, especially if you did Osi, it's valid. That's a valid act of tithing. But not because it's biyodo. Rabbi Yochanan is saying this within the context that we rule, you cannot. You cannot. Okay. No. That's when the effect of the tithing takes effect. Again, I'm doing an act of tithing now for the fruit that will be picked. When you marry a woman, I'm marrying her, I give her the ring now to be married to me in 30 days. When is she married? 30 days or now? And when was the act of marriage done? Now. It's the same thing. The act of tithing is now to be effective when it will be detached because something that's growing cannot be tithed. So you don't have to do act of tithing later. I'll give you an example to bring it out. A non-Jew cannot tithe. He has grain, whatever he has. He cannot tithe. He does an active tithing to take effect in 30 days, and in the interim he converts to be a Jew. Okay? So now that the grain is owned by a Jew, it has to be tithed. Correct? His original act that he did as a non-Jew, does it have any value? It has no value. Because as a non-Jew, you have no relevance to tithing. So the same thing over here. If he wouldn't have the ability to detach it, at the time he did the act of tithing is not an act of tithing, even to be effective when he detaches it. No, no, no. There's a whole discussion. We'll see Tosos. Correct, correct. Right, correct.
So what about the role of an act of God? So, with the tithing, there's such a thing as blight, there's such a thing as a flood, there's such a thing as...
If you rule, Eino de Makdav Shel Bololo, you cannot affect something. Meaning, although there's a perennial yield, you cannot transact that. Right? Your question's not... Right, we're not discussing them yet. We're discussing that you cannot. Only something that you could affect now. At this moment, you can affect it, but I choose not to pick it now. So the question is, my action now, does it have value to affect something in the future? Which I could have brought it about now. It's grown sufficiently. Nothing, it's there. I'm doing an act to tithe something when I will detach it. But right now, if I attach it at this moment, it's good. It's a valid act of tithing.
But when I actually do it at some point in the future, there are a lot of things that could interfere with that, with my ability to do it. Although theoretically...
No, but it's enough. That's not Davar Shel Bololo. Olma means the reality doesn't exist. If the fruit doesn't exist, okay, it doesn't exist. Here, everything exists. There's grain growing, except you have to meet one criteria. It has to be detached. That I could detach at this moment. He may die. We don't worry about a person dying. Right? Because I could do it immediately, therefore that gives value to my action to be considered an act of tithing to be effective when? When I detach it. Until you detach it, it can't be effective because the Torah says you can't tie something that's growing. It says that row, that particular row. He was very specific. No, definitely not.
So what happens in David's case? That something over the next couple of days, a bunch of birds come in, zap the particular fruit that he spoke. What's his obligation with that?
No problem. Those birds, when they ate that produce, that was tithe produce. Right. That was truma. Or chulin, whatever it was. The moment they ate it retroactively, at that moment, my act of tithing became truma. What difference if I pick it or a bird picks it? It's the same thing. No, but it's truma. Right, it gives it to a Kohen. That truma is truma. No. Until it's picked, it's tevil. It's tevil. Once it's picked, then that action caused what I have in my possession to be truma. So now you give it to a Kohen, because it's considered a tithe.
Right. So that specific row of apples are now gone. The ones that he set aside, that at that moment when he set it aside, he said he could pick them, but he decided to leave them, but it's tithe. Those apples...
No, but when is it tithe? When they're going to be picked.
Okay.
Because the tithe can't be effective if they're growing.
Not growing. You can pick them now.
No, but again...
And that's what makes it...
that's why it's not called Davar Shel Bololo. That gives value to his action. But when will the action be effective? When he picks, when it will be picked. When it will be picked. Except you... What? No. he tithed. This is truma for that. So he has the truma. The truma is detached. They picked it. What difference does it? Who picks it? What about if the apples fall off the tree by themselves? That's something else. If they were frozen on the tree, that means they were never picked as fruit. You know, they were never picked as fruit. Has nothing to do with it. What happens if he picks it and somebody steals the apples? It's the same thing. The bird's eating them or a thief steals them. The truma is truma. And now he gives the truma to the Kohen. Okay, let's go further. Let's get back to, right? He has the truma in his hand. I'm tithing this for that row of fruit, a row of peppers or tomatoes or whatever it may be. The tithe is in his hand. The tithe is todush, that's detached. This should be truma for that that's growing, which has been grown but hasn't yet been picked. And then subsequently it's picked. Doesn't make a difference who picks it. Whoever picks it. Now it could be effective because now it's detached.
Everything you make has to be detached when you make the statement.
Of course.
Right. So that the stuff that's growing that hasn't been detached.
That's
will not
going to be
become
effective.
That's going to be
That's chulin.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Gemara asks a question. So we just said that if a person says, I'm marrying, he says to his wife, I'm marrying you on the condition you should accept this to be married to me after I divorce you. So Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan says in that case, it's the equivalent of Dav Shalabol Olam. Because since you have no control, once his wife is divorced, he has control over terminating the marriage. But whether she agrees to marry him or not, that's her decision. So that according to Rabbi Yochanan, he would agree that's not biyodo. So therefore, it's not an act. It's not even an act of marriage. No, accept this in marriage to take effect after I divorce you. I agree. Because when she accepted it, she has no control. She has no control to be married to him at this moment, and he has no control to marry her at this moment. He himself says, take this ring to be married to me after I divorce you. Right. So he only has control on one side of the equation. She has control on the other side. But when she says, I agree, she has no control. She's not in control, he's not in control. Neither are in control. Exactly. And he's not in control. So therefore it's nothing. You have to be in full control to affect whatever you want to affect. Okay? So Mar asks a question. If that's the case, Tifshit Boyd Reboshia. That's where we left off. We should be able to resolve Reboshia's question. Hanosish te prutos liisha. Person gives 2 pennies to a woman. Ba'achas amalo hiskachi li hayom. The first penny says, I want to marry you today. Uba'achas amalo hiskachi li l'achar she'agar sheikh. And I want you now, as a single woman, to accept the second penny that after I divorce you, the second one should take effect. Tif should be not lavi kiddushin. Right? We should resolve it's not kiddushin, because we just said, because if she accepts the first one and the second one to be effective after I divorce you. So he's not in control and she's not in control. We say that the same person has to be in control of the full situation. Okay? So what's the question? We should resolve from Rabbi Yochanan, since it's not biyodo or biyodo, it's not a marriage. First marriage is not a problem. We're talking about the second penny. The second cent.
But if you did this as a package deal, that I'm doing this provided that everything works, maybe the first is not valid either.
If it's conditional. If it's conditional.
I want this package deal.
If he spoke at both sides of it tonight, right? You're right, 100%. But it was saying over here, he has a question, maybe they're both effective. She's married now and she'll be married after she's divorced. Wait one second. That's the Gemara's question. What's Rebosha Tifsha? Let's resolve this question from Rabbi Yochanan. That's exactly what the Gemara is asking. Your question.
First coin puts it into the first.
That's the Gemara's question. Tifsha, let's resolve Rabbi Oshi's question, his query based on Rabbi Yochanan said on this principle, right? So it's in Dilma, no. That's what we need, the Gemara, right? Ki heched tafsi kiddushin hashta tafsi namalacha. Okay. There's a difference between the first case and this case. When a man gives his wife, he's married to her, he says, I want to marry you with this coin, that the marriage should be marriage after I divorce you. So we said, he's in control of the divorce, but not the marriage. And she's in control of eventually being married, but right now she's not in control. Therefore, it's nothing. Okay? But over here, when she's accepting both pennies, right now she's a single woman. Right? She's a single woman. When he gives her the second cent at this moment, she's not married yet. He hasn't married her to be divorced. But she's a woman which could be married at that time at the later date. You following? If he's married to her now, she can't accept marriage because she's married. He can't dictate marriage because it's based on her agreed to accept marriage. Therefore, it's not biyodo, it's not biyodo. Therefore, the act is nothing. At this moment, when she's accepting both pennies, at this moment, they're being done simultaneously. She's a single woman at this moment. So he wants at that later date, right, at this moment, she could say yes, but it's not so simple. But it's only after she's divorced. So since it's within that context, that may be a problem. Yeah, but you're right. But factually, he couldn't, at this moment, if he'd want to marry at that later date. She's a single woman now because she's not yet married to him the first time. But since within the way, the order, the sequence, he wants to take place after I divorce you, right? And there she's not in control at this moment, and he's not in control, maybe that's a problem. That's Rabbi Oshi's question. That's why it's not identical to the case where she's already married, and he wants to marry her after he divorces her. She is, at this moment, she is a single woman. She's accepting both of them simultaneously. See, he wants to affect, because he wants to affect a later moment, at a moment that she's not yet married with the first penny. But factually, as he said it, sequentially speaking, the action now will affect us a time where he will not be in control. Because she will not be in control.
What are we saying here? Isn't the answer to this?
There is no answer.
The first marriage takes place, but the second is no good.
He has a question whether. He has a question, maybe the second one will take place. Rabbi Oshi says maybe the second, there's a chance it could take place.
But we're back to the same scenario that after the first takes place, the man then is in control about the divorce.
But not the marriage.
But the woman is not in control.
Correct.
of the proceedings. And the man is not in control about
But he's saying, at this moment he's giving, the both things are being said simultaneously. You know, it's like the Gemara says that if a person says, this animal should be Ola and Shlomi. Right? So, does he mean simultaneous? Or does he mean consecutive? If it means consecutive, it can't work. Because if it's an Ola, you can't consecrate something that's already consecrated. But if it meant simultaneous, half the animal's Ola, half is Shlomim. So you allow it to become blemished, you redeem it, take 50% of the money by the Ola, 50% of the money by Shlomim. Okay, it's a machlokas. Does he mean consecutive, or does he mean simultaneous? So over here, the person wants the second marriage to take place. That means he wants the second coin to affect later before she's married. You following? He said them simultaneously. There's no question. If he says to her, I want you to be married to me now, and then it's like the equivalent giving him a penny afterwards. So he's already married to her. So that's the first case. But he's saying simultaneously, I want it to take place in this manner. Now that you're single, the latter should take effect after I divorce you. And she accepts it. So today she has control because she can marry him later or not. But once you accept marriage, you're not in control for later. So that's the question. Since she's accepting when she's single for later, she has control? Or do we say since you're accepting within the context of sequence, then we see it as you have no control? And that's Rabbi Oshi's question.
I don't understand this question because it seems to me that if the first marriage takes place, then neither side is fully in control about what happens.
Understand? Right.
And so aren't we back to the same?
If you see it as that, if you see it within that context, 100%.
How can you see it another way?
No, the way like this, because when he's giving you the 2 pennies, he says she's accepting the second cent at a time. She's not, the first marriage didn't yet take effect. Didn't take effect yet. So she has control now on her life versus the later date, theoretically, whenever that takes place. Let's say when he'll divorce, it's going to be in 3 years from now, 20 years from now, whatever it will be. So at this moment, 20 years from now, she could agree or not agree. Because the first marriage hasn't yet taken place.
If he was sitting
The first marriage hasn't taken place.
No, but he's saying that second point should be to marry me after I divorce.
And she agrees to that. Wait, so she has both. He's in control and she's in control.
See, if the case was set up that this man was presenting her with the 2 pennies and the divorce document all at the same time, so everything is now being done together, then I would understand
No
the question.
no divorce document.
No, I understand there's no divorce document. So if that were the case,
No, that's a simple one. That's a simple one.
well,
That-
I still have a question about that one because these things clash with each other. She's got a divorce document.
No, he has to marry her too. I mean,
Yes.
marry, divorce, and marry.
Yeah, so now everything is in front of them both. Then I would say if he were.
Same idea. But he hasn't yet given her the divorce.
No, that's the key. And that's what makes
I mean, you can't get everything simultaneous because you have to be married before you get the divorce. Because you can't have 2 marriages with 1 penny. No, it's 2 marriages. They're 2 marriages. It's 2 marriages. Each marriage has to have its own pruta. Right? You can't marry a woman for less than a pruta. Has nothing, but it's factually it's 2 marriages.
Does the principle that something simultaneously can't take place unless they can take place consecutively apply here or not?
No.
Why not?
Okay, let's go a little further. We'll get back to this tomorrow a little bit. Tanya Kavasur Rabbi Yochanan. We have a brisa. I'm not discounting what you're asking.
No,
There is.
those cases in the Yavamas.
We had it earlier. You know, Yivamis. We had it in kiddushin, second parak.
So how are we leaving this? Is this question unresolved?
That's unresolved. Rabbi Oshi's questions could still be a question, although we accept Rabbi Yochanan's principle. Okay, Tanya Kavasir Rabbi Yochanan. Ein tormim min atolish al mechuber. We have a brayso in support of Rabbi Yochanan. You're not permitted to, or it's not effective. You tie from something that's detached and something that's growing. Vim toram, ein truma so truma. Mean, and it goes to explain what does that mean. You tie, you say this should be truma for something that's growing, for the furrow, for the row of fruit which is still in the field, the row of grain. It's nothing. Keitzad oba peres arugazu tlushim. You truma al peres arugazu mechuberes. Right? This row of wheat which I picked should be truma for the row of wheat which is still growing, and it's grown sufficiently that it's classified as grain. Peres arugazu mechuberes. The row of grain which is growing, you truma al peres arugazu tlushin. So you want what's eventually be picked to be the truma for the grain that already has been picked. Loma klum, it's nothing. Avod oma kashel yitlishu. What about he says, I want it to be effective when it will be picked? V'nitlishu. And factually it was picked. Verv kayomi. It's explicit, there's Rabbi Yochanan. So the act initially is considered an act of tithing, although when you did the act, it was not effective. To be effective when you actually will detach it, because he was in control of that. No, that's Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan is not Mora. Agree or disagree? I have a brisa. I have a Tana supporting what Rabbi Yochanan said. This Tanya Kavas Rabbi Yochanan. No, we said it was the same scenario, but it was Rabbi Yochanan's scenario. Now we're quoting a brisa which supports Rabbi Yochanan. Tanya Kavase. Yes, Ralzeh. Well, we'll see in a moment. We do. It's attributed to the Chacham because Reb Lezer ben Yaakov holds Adam Makdav Shelo Bal Olam. Yes, Al Kain Omer Reb Lezer ben Yaakov. Reb Lezer said even more than that. Filon Peres Aruguzu Tlushin, you Trum Al Peres Aruguzu Mechuberes. Peres Aruguzu Mechuberes, you Trum Al Peres Arugu Tlushin, Kishioviu Shlish. V'yitlishu. We said, when is it assumed the classification of grain has grown minimally a third of its potential? It hasn't yet grown a third. Let's say a quarter has grown. And he says it should be effective when it will grow minimally a third. So you did an action before the grain existed as grain. That's a davar shelo bal olam, right? Ve'viu shlish, and ultimately it did grow the third. V'nitlishu, and they were picked. The grain was picked. Dvar kayomi. We'll speak of Reb Meir later. The Gemara is going to speak about Reb Meir later. We'll discuss Reb Meir. We're not. The Gemara is going to say Rebbe concurs with him, Reb Meir concurs with him. The Gemara say, are they saying the same thing or they're not saying the same thing? The Gemara is going to discuss this. Correct. So therefore, Reb Lezer ben Yaakov's opinion, you could affect something which doesn't even exist yet. Exactly. He's of Adam Makdav Shel Bal Olam. It's vegetation. It's not called grain. But it's the concept of biyodo, which Rabbi Yochanan said has no relevance to this. He wants to affect something which doesn't exist yet. At this moment, nothing could be affected. Even if you would detach it, what is it? It's not called grain. Because it has to grow minimally a third of its growth to be considered grain. Wait a second. Omer Rabbo. Now there's going to be an argument. Does it have to grow? He says, we'll see. Lo Omer Reb Lezer ela b'shachas, ava bagam lo. It's only speaking where it grew in a field, which means it grew to a degree. It's not hasn't reached its growth of a third, but it's grown sufficiently that it has some degree of value. We're going to discuss this in a moment. But if it be something less than that, Rashi says it's like some vegetation growing in a swamp, that kind of thing, it's meaningless. Even Reb Lezer ben Yaakov would agree it's not valid. Now let's discuss it. We discussed what is the rationale why Adam ein Adam Makdav Shel Bal Olam. Why can you not transact something that doesn't exist? First we said a svara. No, because it doesn't exist. You can't affect something that doesn't exist. Because just as a person can't affect something that he doesn't own, if it doesn't exist, you definitely don't own it, right? That's the principle. But in addition, there's another reason. What is a crucial component for any transaction? Intent. Intent is based on what? Are you sufficiently sincere when you say what you say? Something that doesn't exist, could you be sincere about something which is just totally in the abstract? And there's a chance, because it may not exist, a person's not sufficiently sincere. So one hasn't met the criteria of Gemira's das. One doesn't have a sufficient amount of intent to affect the action to be considered an act of transfer. That's the discussion, okay? So therefore, if you're of the opinion that you could affect something that will eventually come, that's not lacking in ownership. That's not it's considered mine because it's meant to be. Okay? It's more than a bird in the bush. It's a bird in the hand. But factually, do I really mean what I say? Because it hasn't achieved that level of growth yet. It's a question of Gemira's das. So Rabbi's of the opinion, if it's growing, it grew already, although it's less, but you're not far from it's minimal growth, person has sufficient Gemira's das. What about it just started to bud? From budding to develop into something which is about to be grain, it's a while, like David said. There could be blight, many things. An animal could come and eat the vegetation. It may not happen. Because of all these possibilities, a person may not have sufficient Gemira's das. Therefore, the action has no value. That's Rabbi's. We'll see. Maybe he holds by Peres Dekel, where there's nothing. It would not be good, according to Rabbi. He says only because it's shachas, there's sufficient vegetation that has a degree of value. But if it's less than that, then it's nothing.
The tree exists, the tree always gives a yield, whatever.
We'll discuss it. Why? What about if it starts budding on the tree and it never goes beyond the bud? Right? Okay, we'll see. Rav Yosef Amafil Bagam. Rav Yosef says no, that even if it's just vegetation, it just starts budding, that's sufficient growth that a person has, according to Rav Leslie. They were arguing to have Gemira's Das, to what degree does it have to grow for a person to have sufficient intent to bring about the transfer? Rabbah says it has to grow, it has to be shachas. It has to have a degree of vegetation which has some degree of value. Rabbi Yosef says it has to grow, but it has to grow something. But minimally it has to bud. If it hasn't even started budding, let's say you put the seed in the ground, and it hasn't started to come out of the ground yet, or just there's some indications coming out of the ground, it's nothing.
If there is a bud, and would you cut it at this point?
Nothing, it's nothing.
It's nothing, so it still doesn't exist.
Good, but again, so that's what we're explaining. They're of the opinion of the Makdav Shel Balolam. It's like the yield that will come. So the question is, so what's the issue? Not that I can't affect something that's not mine, but it's a question of intent. At this point, is there sufficient intent or is there not sufficient intent? That's our discussion.
It doesn't have a name of grain.
It's not grain. It's like fruit that hasn't yet grown, but it's meant to grow. So I told you that we have to address two issues. You can't affect something that's not yours. Since it's meant to come out, that's already considered mine. That's my domain. But what about intent? Do you really mean what you say? Because factually, it almost doesn't exist, or it doesn't exist as grain. So that's the argument of Rabbi Rav Yosef. And does it have to? Rabbi says it has to exist to have a degree of value. When it's already grown sufficiently to have that degree of value, you have sufficient intent. Rav Yosef says no, not even that. Even if it starts budding, that's sufficient.
Is this little grain any different than a chair? That's not grain.
No. But the